Good evening, Grinders. Hey, welcome to Monday Showdown Live here on Rotogrinders. I'm Jordan Cooper, aka Blenderhead, aka Blender HD, aka hopefully solo first in tonight's big Showdown contest on DraftKings. And join with me, a man that maybe he'll be the one that I don't mind splitting first with. It's Justin Van Zuden, STL Cards, Rams, Buccaneers. Do you feel like this is going to be like a better real life football game than like DFS football game?
Yes, these teams are difficult to figure out from a DFS perspective, with their usage and kind of the way they rotate guys in and out sometimes, and running backs and receivers, and it gets a little frustrating. So this is a difficult showdown slate. I think it's going to be a great game, and an important one in the context of the NFC race. But in terms of peg and showdown lineups, it's an interesting one. But I think more so tonight than normal, we're going to see ownership spread out a little bit. We've had a lot of showdown slates lately with guys at 80 or 90% ownership, and I don't necessarily think we're going to see a whole lot of that tonight outside of the quarterback. So it is an interesting one to break down.
If you're in the YouTube chat, as always, well, we could see you. I have the YouTube popped up. If you have any questions, feel free to pop them in. A lot of times we cover the questions towards the end. We'll be here through 7:45 Eastern, so kind of like last 15 minutes of the show. But while you're at it, hit that thumbs up button, hit the notification bell, hit the subscription button, hit ourselves in the head. Feel free to poke around. Obviously, if you start poking around on the video, you'll pause it. So hit it again, so you play it again. So just move your mouse around. It's fine. The YouTube likes it when you do that. It'll help us out. As far as inactives, Justin, on this slate, I mean, we looked through it. I mean, we had some question on who the kicker for the Rams was going to be. Like, was it going to be Matt Gay, or was it going to promote McGinnis from the practice squad? But we don't have to worry about that. I don't see any inactives like Keyshawn Vaughn. I mean, it's pretty much. I mean, this player pool is quite condensed.
Yeah, it is. We don't have anything, I think, that's really affected in the way that I'm building lineups as far as inactives go. So should be all systems go as far as building the lineups with the guys you expected to be building them with earlier in the day, and shouldn't be too much that affects that on the injury front. So other than my best ball team, some of my best ball teams with Keyshawn Vaughn that are sinking fast, I think for as far as DFS goes, we're all set here tonight.
Okay, so let's take a look at the usual suspects for these teams. Obviously, on the let's tackle the Rams side. I think the Rams side may be a little bit easier. No, I say that, and I'm going to go like it really depends on the position. Like it's teams that use multiple running backs as well as multiple receivers. To me, there's no clear like wide receiver one, and there's not really a clear running back one. So on the Rams side, we have Goff at 9,800. Obviously, the primary receivers are Kupp, Woods, Reynolds. He's been running most of the wide receiver three slot type of routes, or Kupp's in the slot and Reynolds is on the outside. You got Higbee. You got Gerald Everett in two tight end sets. He's cheap down there at 2,600. And then you got the three-headed monster at running back. In past games, before last week, we saw Cam Akers not really get much run, but in the last game, he got a whole bunch of carries. But Henderson's going to be the lead back. Malcolm Brown, will get a lot of the pass catching running back type of snaps. And then obviously we have like the cheap guys at the bottom. I think a lot of people are going to look at like who do I play between Kupp, Woods, and Reynolds. And they priced up Reynolds. So Reynolds is $6,800. He's no longer like the $3,400 wide receiver. I'm going to assume that based on our ownership here, that Kupp is going to be the top target and probably a popular captain choice. But how do you think this Rams offense stands out, especially against the Buccaneers team that is known for being more able to stop the run? I think the Rams running backs are going to be the less owned pieces, and the wide receivers are going to be the more high owned ones.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. I mean, Kupp lost some snaps in the last game. I think there was some rumblings that he was dealing with a wrist injury. I mean, I don't expect that to be a long-term issue. I think he'll get back to his normal snap count tonight. And Reynolds is generally a guy that gets ignored from a fantasy perspective, and especially now that he's priced up and chalky. I think I might take an underweight stance on Josh Reynolds tonight and go higher on the other two, especially if they have trouble running the ball. If the game's competitive, I think Kupp and Woods are the guys that are going to get the targets. So I like them the most. And the running backs, it's a good rush defense. It's a three-man split for snaps. Like, it's really difficult to endorse the running backs. Malcolm Brown I like better for his pass catching ability, and frankly, he's been their most consistent guy. Even though everyone likes to target Henderson, Brown has been the guy for most of the year that has been the most consistent week in and week out. So I really don't love any of them. My exposure to the Rams will probably start with Kupp and Woods and Goff, of course.
Right, and obviously the tight ends. I'm assuming Gerald Everett is going to be like a cheap punt, but I mean we currently have him at only 10% owned. We have Higbee at 17% owned. Obviously, I mean most likely, I mean yes, it could get there playing both of the tight ends in the lineup, but for the running backs, we have an ownership wise. Let's take a look here. We have Henderson at 32% owned, Brown at 15% owned, Cam at 14% owned. But Cam is not like cheap. He's 2,800. Malcolm Brown probably has the higher floor because he may catch 3 or 4 balls out of the backfield. And at 15% ownership, Henderson is most likely going to get the goal line work. Are you mostly avoiding the running back? Do you think that it's going to be spread out enough that maybe no running back from the Rams is going to be in the GPP winning lineup? Or based on this ownership, like maybe it makes sense if you for uniqueness for first place that maybe you play one of these guys in your captain spot.
Yeah, I don't hate that. I also don't hate the idea of fading them because against a good rush defense where you're looking at maybe none of them getting more than a 40% snap share. That's what it was last week. 41% for Brown, 33% for Henderson, 26% for Akers. Like, can these guys really be difference makers on a single game slate against a good rush defense if they're only playing 25 snaps? And the problem is that, it all comes down to a touchdown in a single game slate. So if one of them, breaks off a 50-yard touchdown at their salaries, well, you probably got to have them. So as much as the matchup would dictate, maybe we take a pause here. I hesitate to fade them entirely. So at that point, I become inclined to just take a shot on the guys that are going to be lower owned, and that would be Brown and Akers, and not as much Henderson.
Okay, so let's take a look at the Buccaneers. We have a very similar situation with them. I mean, you have Brady at 11K. They throw the ball fairly commonly, but they have their three-headed monster at wide receiver, which is Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Antonio Brown. Obviously, you got Gronk there at tight end, 6,200, who's a popular target. And then you have we'll talk about the running backs in a second, but you always have the Cameron Brate, Scotty Miller, Tyler Johnson. Brady can spread the ball around. These guys will see some snaps. And he has no problem throwing in the end zone to like anyone, essentially. Godwin is going to be one of the highest owned players on the slate. I mean, from a floor perspective and a target share, I mean, Godwin makes the most sense in the slot. And then Antonio Brown is cheaper than Mike Evans, but Mike Evans is more of an end zone target. Evans at 9,000 doesn't really project that well for his price, but that's also going to lower his ownership. We have Evans at 30%, Godwin at 53%, Brown at 33%. I mean, Godwin's going to be a popular captain, paired with Brady. Do you think that the ownership difference, because you're not really getting a discount, right? Evans is more expensive than Godwin. Brown is, they're 600 plus and minus from a standpoint of if you're going to fade Godwin, for instance, like you could play Godwin. I think projection-wise, he's the best play out of the three. But if you're going to fade Godwin, does it make sense that if Godwin has a bad game, that one of the other two wide receivers ends up being the winning captain?
It's possible. I've tried to figure out if the Rams are going to use Ramsey on Mike Evans. I think they are. Based on the few things I've been able to find, it seems like Ramsey might shadow Evans. And if that's the case, I don't want a whole lot of him at 9K. I'd rather save 600 with Godwin, even though he's going to be chalky. Or I'd rather preferably even save the 1200 with Antonio Brown. I think Brown is actually the safe target there tonight. I know that, his snaps have been kind of hit or miss in those first two games, but he's going to get the targets when he's on the field. And so, I'm fine playing him, or even it's a YOLO dart on Scotty Miller. If they happen to fall behind in lineups where maybe you're using the Rams running backs, I think those are the types of lineups you play Scotty Miller. He only played 9 snaps last week, so I mean that's a concern, obviously, but he's only 1,400. I think you play him in some lineups if you're telling yourself the story that you think the Rams might get a lead in this game.
Right, and it's possible that Jalen Ramsey doesn't shadow Evans and just follows whoever on his side.
Yeah, it's possible. I was just trying to read through the tea leaves, but
and obviously he could obviously Ramsey could shadow Evans and Evans could beat him. So I mean, people, right. Yes, he's a shutdown corner. I get it. I mean, I'm not a huge fan of wide receiver cornerback matchups to begin with, but sometimes good receivers just beat good cornerbacks. I mean, we see that with DK Metcalf. Oh, he can't play him, and then beats him, and then sometimes he gets shut down. So the ownership mitigates that. Like, I'm just looking, like, if they were all equally owned, yes, I'd probably avoid the guy that's going to see Jalen Ramsey more often, but is the lower ownership worth taking a shot on the lower probability chance? I'm playing larger field GPPs, so I'm more inclined to take the shot. But if you're playing single entry and smaller field stuff, I could absolutely understand, playing the higher probability plays. Then on the running back side, we got Ronald Jones, we got Leonard Fournette. Obviously, I mean, LaShawn McCoy is active, but does he matter? Ronald Jones had that 98-yard touchdown run last week. Outside of that, he still had a pretty decent game, even though he did fumble. I mean, you have to kind of build that in. But -1 fumbles lost. Just assume that's his probably his 25th percentile outcome automatically. Fournette's going to be more popular. I mean, Fournette's actually going to be more popular. I mean, Jones is coming in at 41% ownership, but at the cheap price of 4,400 and more, I guess, pass game usage, Fournette down in this range is going to be chalky for those types of builds. But you also have the recency bias of people looking at the last game log with we take a look at Ronald Jones here, and 23 for 192 with 2 targets and 25.8 points. Like, people look at that going, well, I'm going to Ronald Jones. Based on the DraftKings Sportsbook odds, Jones has a +135 to score, and Fournette has a +240 to score. So from a goal line usage perspective, like, Jones probably has that touchdown equity, but Fournette, if they're going to split like 70-30, in the 30% of snaps that Fournette gets, he's more likely to catch passes than Ronald Jones, especially with Jones' stone hands that Brady may not even want to dump the ball off to him. Are you more likely, how are you going to deal with Ronald Jones? Do you think he's going to be 41% owned? Do you think he's worth playing at that ownership? Or if I told you Ronald Jones was 20% owned and Fournette was 40%, if it was flipped, how are you dealing with the Buccaneers running back?
Yeah, if it was flipped, I'd play Ronald Jones. At this point, at double the salary and almost double the ownership, I'll play Fournette. I do think that recency bias, particularly in the large field tournaments, will play a factor. So give me Fournette at the lower ownership. I mean, yeah, last week Jones was great and they rode the hot hand, but the 3 games prior to that, Fournette had played on more snaps than Jones in 3 consecutive games. So I don't think there's this huge disparity between them, and Fournette's half the salary. So again, all the running backs in this game are risky because you don't exactly know how the snaps are going to go. We don't have Dalvin Cook in this game. So you've got to kind of take a leap of faith in some spots. And if you want to play Evans or Godwin and you want to play, Kupp and Woods, Well, you got to save salary somewhere, and I don't think that the 8,800 Ronald Jones at 40%, it just doesn't feel optimal to me. So, yeah, give me Fournette at half the salary and less ownership.
Okay, as always with the showdowns, we have to talk about kickers and defenses, as well as the cheapy guys. Okay, as I say on every showdown show, kickers and defenses typically have limited upside. So you have to look at the players below them in price and go, how often does a cheapy guy put up enough points that beats out a kicker or a defense? And if the less that are able to, the more valuable kickers and defenses are. So we got Suck Up at 16% owned, Gay at 8% owned, Rams at 8% owned, Bucks at 12% owned. So these are kind of low ownerships for the kickers and the defenses. I think this is definitely the type of game. You know, Brady could make mistakes. Goff could obviously make mistakes. The Rams tend to be a little bit more run heavy, but I mean that doesn't mean anything in a one game sample size. So with the kickers and defenses being, reasonably priced. So you have 4K, 3,800, 3,600, 3,000. So they're all grouped right together. And then underneath them is Akers, Everett, Brait, Miller, Johnson, Munt, McCoy, and my boy, Van Jefferson Jr., VJJ. He gets a target like once a game or something. He'll be in there, every once in a while. With the kickers and the defenses being less owned on average than most showdown slates, do you see yourself building constructions with them, or you're more likely to take shots on touchdowns with the cheaper guys?
No, I think this is a slate where you can play them. I think you'll see some drive stall. I mean, these are good teams, and I don't think enough attention gets paid to their defenses. In terms of rushing yards allowed per game, the Bucks are second in the league. The Rams are fifth. And in terms of passing yards allowed per game, the Bucks are ninth in the league, and the Rams are second. So you've got two teams that are in the top 10 in the league in rush defense and pass defense, scoring off against each other. Nobody wants to play the kickers and the defenses. I could very well see a lot of drives getting stalled in that 20 to 30 yard line range. You get some 40-yard field goals and some sacks and a couple turnovers. I mean, it's definitely viable tonight. So I don't necessarily think this is going to be an ugly game. I mean, I don't think it's going to be a 10-6 game, but it is a relatively low total game, and I think that you will see these defenses step up. So I do like them maybe more so than, say, on a slate like last night where we had the Chiefs and the Raiders, and you just knew there was going to be offense. It's not necessarily the case tonight, and I think you'll see. Think you'll see the defenses make some big stops, and that means some field goals.
Just to clarify a point that's being discussed in the chat, typically I'm not playing like both defenses together. I mean, there are games where that comes through. I get it. Or playing both kickers, playing three of them together. So when I talk about playing defenses, it's like playing one or the other, or one or the other of kickers. Like to me, like maybe you could play a kicker and a defense together. Obviously, in really low scoring slates, you could play four of them. Play them all together and hope the ball never moves. But I mean, that's not necessarily the highest probability path to success. But I think pairing up, because with defenses, don't think in terms of points allowed. Just like Justin said, that you're not expecting a 10-6 game, but will one of the touchdowns be scored by the defense or special teams? Because that's how they hit a double-digit ceiling. That in a shutout, obviously. So it's perfectly fine to play the Rams defense and Brady, because he throws a pick six and then Brady gets the ball back, so he gets to accumulate more points. So don't feel inclined to be like, well, I can't play offensive players against a defense, because they work. You're looking for the 85th percentile outcomes, like that's pick sixes and return touchdowns. So don't use those groups to exclude that from your player pool. Let's take a look at Slate IQ. This is a premium article. I know we're on YouTube, so just because I'm showing you some premium stuff, you could sign up, rotogrinders.com/premium. You can click on the link in the YouTube description. You get $5 off your first month. Core 4. NBA's coming up, right? Next month, we got less than 30 days to NBA. You get that in your Core 4 premium subscription. Justin over here, does tons of PGA stuff. You get all of that. That's in premium. You get when MLB comes back, you get all the MLB stuff. So sign up for that. You get Lineup HQ. You get to use the projections, use the optimizer as much as you want, build as many lineups, all the features you want. But Eric Beimford does a Slate IQ data analysis every island game, right? Monday, Thursday, Sunday for Showdown, and comparing like the archetype of the game to past slates. We have the entire DraftKings database from ResultsDB going through and simulating like the 25 most similar slates to price, to position, to the types of players, and then seeing what lineups show up in the top 0.1%. And based on this, as you see on the screen, roster construction wise, we see a lot of slates where the best leverage are like kind of semi-onslaughts, the 4-2s, the 2-4s, because a lot of the field does play 3-3s. But actually on this slate, according to Slate IQ, that 3-3 is the most rostered in the construction, but it also provides the most leverage. Like it's done the most, but not done often enough. We see the 5-1s and the 1-5s are very low probability. It could still happen. So from a 3-3 perspective, three Bucks, 3 Rams, and then we also have captain and positional usage here, this chart. And for a lot of showdown slates, there are very clear choices based on Slate IQ. Here it's very spread out. Here we have, the leverage on each spot. Maybe wide receiver 2 provides you the most leverage, but it makes sense for the teams because wide receiver 2 on the Buccaneers is Chris Godwin because we go by price for Slate IQ. So he's the second most expensive wide receiver on the team. And wide receiver 2 for the Rams is Robert Woods. So it's not like we're talking about wide receiver 2s that are garbage. These teams, the receivers are very close to one another, and we see that spread out here. We see we actually have RB1 as the highest, so that would be Ronald Jones or Darrell Henderson. According to Slate IQ, it's actually going to be owned enough in the captain. I doubt that. I don't think people are going to play running back in the captain. So if it's coming up with the top 0.1% lineups having RB1 in the captain, like I may be more inclined to give that a shot in large field GPPs. But it's, look, we even have 3% kicker captain. As a lot of times that bar on that graph over there is like you have to have a magnifying glass.
Can't even see it.
Right, exactly. And same for like the DSTs, like it's spread out enough. So, Justin, from a captain perspective on DraftKings, I think the popular ones are going to be Kupp and Godwin, paired with obviously Brady and Goff. Do you see other paths where you could make a construction that's a little bit more unique while still not getting crazy?
I think you could captain a running back and use that defense, and if it's 28-6, and you've got the running back and he scores a couple touchdowns, and maybe they get a defensive score and some late sacks and turnovers. I don't think that's crazy. He used Jones or Fournette with the Bucs defense, or one of the Rams running backs with their defense. I think that's a reasonable strategy. That's not too nuts. But most people will focus on the quarterbacks and the primary receivers, I think, for sure.
Okay, you have to remember I produce these shows, so I have to take care of the chat moderation a little bit. Please don't spam the YouTube channel. And while you're at it, hit that thumbs up button. You could spam that thumbs up button all you want. Click it off, click it on, click the thumbs down button. I think it doesn't matter either way. Do you think a unique lineup? I know people are joking about it in the YouTube chat of everyone's going with the passing game. Why don't we play multiple running backs? Like how many? Like most people, especially if they're building a bunch of lineups in the optimizers, they're gonna set a rule of like no more than one of Henderson, Brown, and Akers. No more of one of Fournette or Jones. It makes sense. They're negatively correlated. These guys are not on the field together. They replace one another. But in a game, let's say you're fading one of the quarterbacks. You could fade both of them if you want. But let's say you're fading Brady. Doesn't it make sense a little bit that if Goff doesn't throw for touchdowns, that maybe you roster 2 Rams running backs? And then vice versa. I actually think it's more viable on the Rams than it is on the Buccaneers, because I just don't think that Buccaneers score 3 touchdowns and it's 2 through Jones and 1 through Fournette on the ground. So Brady doesn't get that passing touchdown. But on the Rams, I mean, we see this all the time. You roster on classic slates, right? You roster, I'm gonna stack Goff with Woods and Cup and something, and then Henderson has a touchdown, and then Brown has a touchdown, and you're sitting there going, what? Goff has 12 points, and the Rams put up 35.
Sounds about right. Feels like what's going to happen. I think we will see something unique in this game. I think we'll see a solo winner. Just because I think the ownership will be spread out a little bit more than what we usually expect. And, I think one of the defenses will make a big play, and they're going to be super low owned. And it's just hard to parse out the running backs and the receivers. And if Scotty Miller does something or if your boy does something, I just...
You can say his name. Say it, Vajayjay.
Vajayjay. Van Jefferson Jr. I just think you're going to see something wonky happen in this game. So for that reason, I think we'll see a solo winner.
Well, if you want to go by extreme slate IQ, the way that it works, take a look at the captain position leverage. There's an ROI column. Eric explains this in his article that the slate is simulated so many times. And then obviously ROIs for those lineups are, who comes in first, solo versus tied, 71,000 ways. The highest ROI lineup based on slate IQ is kicker in the captain. Now you look at that, and people, if you have to understand how large field GPPs are set up, that a solo winner gets you like $300,000, right? I mean, like that's how much you win when you win solo. When you win with a 70-way tie, you're winning, $26,000, which is, okay, great. Okay, that's great. But obviously your ROI goes down. So in these types of things where it says like wide receiver 2 provides the most amount of leverage, but it comes out to a minus 8.8% ROI. So it wins more often, but it doesn't necessarily win the most amount of money. So based on Slate IQ, Kicker 1 has an ROI of 321.1%. Which, if you've seen these Slate IQ articles, that's ridiculously high. I mean, like, you don't see those numbers. But that really comes into account of it doesn't win that often. It actually wins at the lowest percentage. But when it does win, you're most probably solo, so you're getting $300,000 in the price. So if you looked at the range of outcomes as a set, mathematically, it would be tons of losses, tons of minus $15, minus $15, minus $15, and then there's one entry that you win 300,000, and then over the course of, if we played this out 100,000 times, you'll win one out of those 100,000, but it provides the most amount of ROI. Obviously, we're playing the slate once. You don't have the opportunity to play it, a billion times. So I just wanted to highlight that. It doesn't mean I'm making a kicker captain, but as people that know me on Showdown for these large field GPPs, if there's anyone that's going to make a kicker captain for as a YOLO, if I'm gonna choose, do I play Van Jefferson Jr. or do I play Ryan Suckup or Matt Gay in my captain slot? If that ends up being the winning lineup, I'm the type of person that may have one.
You just laid out your path to victory tonight.
Well, my path to victory, if we repeated it a million times, I'm going to win once. Yeah, sure.
Variance is a fickle beast, so you just gotta, make sure the process is right, and eventually you'll get there.
So it's 7:30 right now. We got 15 minutes left on the show. If you're in the YouTube chat, feel free to post your QQs. Hit that thumbs up button. Hit that subscribe button. Hit the QQs in the chat. There are plenty of people just making fun of me. Am I that white? Blender is the powder from the movie Powder. That's an old reference, right? But I get out enough, right? I got lights up. I mean,
yeah, it's the lighting,
right? If you were here the 2 shows ago, if you want to talk about Charlotte's Web, we could talk about literature for the next 15. I don't read that much, but we could if you have questions about that. So Andy Cow on Twitter said, "Why is Tyler Higbee ceiling lower than Gerald Everett's based on our projections?" So I'm gonna look. I don't know. I mean, I'm showing you the Blitz projections. So we have Everett No, Everett here, I've ceiling at 10 and Higbee ceiling at 13 at his 75th
Our
percentile
our
outcome.
our traditional projections have them reversed, but only like 0.4 of a point apart.
Okay. I think it's more likely, I think it's based on, depending on the sample size that you're using, like short term, long term. I think Everett tends to get more high value touches. Like he'll get more a red zone target, while Higbee will get the 20-yard pass in the middle of the field. Then I'm assuming the RG projections are in a short term taking that more into account. But I mean, even with the blitz projections, I mean, just based on price, Everett is 2,200 cheaper, and the differences in median are not like dramatic. It's like 2 points, and in the span of one slate, like 2 points isn't all that much to write home about.
Yeah, I like Everett on the merits of the salary and the ownership. I think he's the sharper play.
Eric Johnson, QQ, can you fade all the running backs on the slate? I think most people will. That's why I think I'm more inclined to play him.
Yeah, you can, because it's difficult to parse them apart. So people are going to just root for the quarterbacks and use all the pass catchers, and it will be difficult to make it unique that way. But I certainly don't mind it if you're only building one lineup or if it's a smaller field or a cash game. But you got to sprinkle them in if you're multi-entering, I think.
Tyler asks, just in general, what are the safest plays if you're playing cash games?
I mean, it would be both quarterbacks, obviously. I think Godwin, Cup, and Woods are the three safest pass catchers.
Single entry or cash games, would you prefer Fournette at the captain plus Suckup, or Cup captain plus Everett? I think 2 is the obvious.
Yeah, agreed.
Let's see. People are talking. Can you discuss cash strategy for showdowns? I mean, showdown is very high variance. Typically for showdowns, you want to try to get the highest floor guys into your lineup as much as possible, and typically that's quarterbacks, bell cow / workhorse running backs. Like, these teams really don't have any, and then guys with the most targets, and then you really don't mind the kickers. I think people really sleep on kickers in cash games, and they're the safest for if you want to get a 6 to 8 points. Like, I think you have more routes for the kickers than you do from like second tight ends and things like that.
Yeah, I agree. I don't play cash games on the showdown slates, but there is some potential edge there. But I mean, most contests are going to have those quarterbacks at 90% owned probably.
As far as construction, I mean, we went over as far as 3-3, 2-4, 4-2. I tend to just go by slate IQ a lot of times and just I'm just gonna trust Eric and Jamino and go with that construction. I'm playing 7 lineups tonight, so I'm not like playing a ton of lineups. I typically don't play a ton when I do shows, but I'm leaning more towards, if slate IQ says 3-3, I don't want it to end up being 3-3 and then I didn't listen to slate IQ, and then I'm like, why didn't I listen? I would have won. So I mean, Justin, are you even considering 5-1 builds?
Probably not tonight. I don't see this game turning into an onslaught. The Bucks got blasted in their last primetime game against the Saints. I don't hate it, but most of mine are probably 4-2 or 3-3 tonight.
Taff asks, is correlation a big thing in Showdown? I think that's a nuanced question. Correlation is a huge thing in DFS to begin with. Like, if you're going to play a wide receiver in your captain slot, he's correlated with the quarterback. So you usually want to play the quarterback in your flex. But the thing is that just because they're correlated doesn't mean it happens all the time. So most sharp players play higher correlated lineups. And because there are more of those types of lineups, that means less correlated lineups have more leverage. So they gain more value, but they're more likely to either win a lot or lose a lot. So when you're really considering correlation, you have to consider correlation alongside leverage of, like I said before, playing multiple running backs from the same team is negatively correlated. They're less likely to hit ceilings together, but also less people play them. So maybe on the instances where the negative correlation, that event does happen, you gain more money by doing that because less people are playing them. So Justin, I mean, I know setting up rules in lineup HQ. I know a lot of people do that. I mean, are there any like negative correlations that you're doing this slate that you're doing for the sake of being different?
I mean, the negative correlations are the running backs together, but again, in some builds, if you're expecting a blowout, maybe you play 2 running backs from a team plus the defense, and then some pass catchers on the other side. Like, I think that's very few people are going to do that. So if you build some lineups with Fournette plus Jones, plus Tampa's defense, plus one of the Rams pass catchers, and the Bucs get out to a nice lead, I mean, that lineup is super positively correlated. So I like that idea of programming that group into some of your lineups.
Okay, Chin R2. I think he asked a good question. I think people may not understand the difference between kicker and DST correlation. To correlate with kickers, say suck up. Are we playing the Rams defense because they are stopping Tampa? LA scoring though. What do you think? Like, I understand that points allowed for defense is not a path to ceiling. So like, to me it doesn't matter that oh well they're scoring but they're the kicking field goals type of thing. Typically, if you did the analysis, kickers and the opposing defenses are negatively correlated because the defense is getting sacks, is getting the other team is turning the ball over enough that the team defense, that's the winning team. And then we see towards the later half of the third quarter and the fourth quarter, if the losing team is down by more than a touchdown, like they ain't kicking field goals. Like they ain't like the winning team, the team that's ahead by 7 points, is kicking the field goal to go up by 10, but the losing team isn't. So it's very rare that the losing team's DST is in the winning lineup, but the winning team's DST is in the lineup and the opposing kicker is not going to be. I mean, that makes sense, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and you can have wonky things like the losing defense. They don't score an offensive touchdown, they get a defensive touchdown. I mean, weird things can happen, but in most cases, the team that's won the game is the team that's going to have the higher scoring kicker and defense.
JJ asks, we can't necessarily go deep into this. Is there a way to check to see if your lineup has been duped? You can do that in Excel. There are functions. You download the CSV of the contest, and you have your lineups, and you look up. You look up your lineups and see, are there any other rows that look like my rows, and how many of them? So you could do that. You could probably go on GitHub. There's some little programs that do it. I've made the suggestion. It's in the queue. Hopefully at some point that lineup HQ you'll be able to do that. You'll be able to upload and look in results DB. Like that would be beautiful. Yeah, I don't have to worry. I don't have to download anything. So hopefully, I would love to have that. But typically, if I'm playing like massive fields, I'm trying to get lineups that are less duped than 15 times, 10 times. They don't have to be unique. I mean, I don't mind 50,000. Like that's perfectly fine with me. But I really try to avoid lineups that are going to be duped 80, 140 times. Those type of lineups. On this slate, I don't know if you have to worry that much about it since the options are so close to each other. We don't have these slates where there's like 3 or 4 obvious chalk options that if you build with them, it's very hard to get unique.
Yeah, on this slate, I don't think there'll be as many, 150, 200 dupes lineups as there usually is. There'll still be obviously lots because it's a single game slate, and there are going to be lots of duplicates, but not as massive as what we've seen on some other slates.
Right. Matthew P. asks, kicker and cash night. I think definitely. Why not? The kickers are you get some points.
Sure.
Just to understand that the upside is limited. But I mean, hey, didn't we have Ryan Suckup as the winning captain maybe 4 or 5 showdowns ago?
Yeah, kick a 50-yarder and you're good to go.
Okay, if there's any more questions, I'm sorry we don't we won't comment on specific lineups. Like some people, I know, like you're posting. What do you think of my lineup? But I mean, if we did that, we'd have 8 million people posting. What do you think of our lineup? Without the contest or whatever. So I apologize for that. If you had 2v2, 1v1, those type of questions, okay. I'm not a big fan of the questions, but if that's what the people want, that's what the people get. But Rob Martin says I'm normally not a two defense guy, but considering who's missing on both teams' O line and the two defenses, maybe it'll be different and it's a path to victory. Especially with the defenses projecting to be less owned than they would be on normal slates. Like I'm not against it. It's just I'm not I'm just not sure that like these passing props for Goff and Brady are like 282, 268. The receiving props are 50 plus from each receiver. Like I just feel like two defense lineups work in slates where like you could pinpoint like the one guy on the team that's going to get 40 points, and that's all you need. But I think the points will be spread out enough on the two teams that they outscore the defenses more often than to play two of them, right? Play one of them, play one of them all you want, right? I got to fit that in. Play whatever defense you want. But so I mean, are there lineups, Justin, that hey, I talked about it yesterday. It ended up winning a lineup with neither quarterback. Like, do you see how that gets there?
It's tough in this game to see that happening. I mean, unless it's running backs, a defense, a kicker. I just don't. I don't see that happening here because the volume with the other players is so spread out that it'd be have to be a really unique game for that to happen.
All running back lineup,
I
right?
mean, it could, yeah. Running backs get all the vulture all the touchdowns. You don't see that as much in this day and age of the NFL. And this just doesn't feel like the game where that's going to happen, but you never know.
Right. I mean, imagine doing this. You play Ronald Jones and the captain. Okay, so you got him. Then you play two Rams running backs. And you play Fournette also. Even though that's totally negatively correlated. You probably shouldn't do that. And then you play one of the I mean, you could fit that in. Trust me, it's not a lineup I'm doing. Like I'm not suggesting you do this, but I'm pretty sure that lineup is going to be under 10 dupes if you're jamming in running
Oh
backs.
yeah, for sure. That will probably be unique. The problem is, I just don't see football going back to 1970 here today, with all the teams running the ball 75% of the time. But who knows? It's 2020.
If this was a Lions and Browns game, like then you do it, right? You play Chubb, you play Hunt, you play AP, you play Kerryon Johnson, right? You play both defenses, and then when you watch the game, you just feel like right, you're watching paint dry, but maybe you
No,
win.
just don't look at the Thanksgiving slate. Because everyone's excited to see Detroit and Houston and Washington and Dallas and Pittsburgh and Baltimore with half their team testing positive for COVID. So it's going to be a rough Thanksgiving slate.
Yeah, but the Ravens, at least we eliminate players, right? Like now we can play Gus Edwards. We play Gus Edwards on Thanksgiving, and Justice Hill gets 2 touchdowns. I mean, Justin, doesn't this happen? I played NFL DFS. This will be my 4th year of playing in a Thanksgiving slate. So I didn't start with NFL DFS. I played other sports. It seems like every Thanksgiving, there's like I just remember LeGarrette Blount, that slate at like 1% ownership, just like running the ball in 3 times. Like it seems like every Thanksgiving on a 3-game slate, there's some third running back, right? It's not a wide receiver. It's not like, oh, okay, some guy catches an 80-yard bomb and has to be in the winning lineup. It's always it's always the fullback. It's a double. The fullback has 2 touchdowns. So I know the sample size is small, but if I had to predict anything, I typically don't predict outcomes. I think on Thanksgiving there'll be people passed out on the couch watching the second game, especially the second or third game, and someone's gonna have 20 points that is like 0.8% owned, and you just look on Twitter and people are just like throwing stuff.
We had I remember this, that you mentioned the kind of the random game. there were 4 offensive touchdowns in the Saints Falcons game last year, which was the 3rd game on Thanksgiving. And the 2 Saints offensive touchdowns were both Taysom Hill. And this is a game in which Drew Brees played. Taysom Hill ran one in and caught one. And then the 2 Falcons touchdowns were Russell Gage and Jaden Graham. Not Ridley, and Julio was out. But I mean, that's how the Thanksgiving slates are won and lost. So enjoy your turkey and play Alex Smith.
Apparently, the last question before we go, since we got a golf person in here, does Cars have any Robert Streb?
I'm
assuming that's what he means, Streb, right?
Yeah, Streb won the tournament yesterday. I did not have any Streb, so it was an okay week for me, but kudos to Streb for winning that tournament.
We could get all of Cards' golf content on Rotogrinders Premium. Writes an article, does a show, Tambo. He's on with Noto. We got plenty of golf. We have probably one of the best golf PGA DFS teams in the industry.
And there's no golf this week because of Thanksgiving, but we're putting out some content for the Euro Tour because they've got a pretty big tournament. So we're going overseas this week to keep everybody covered. There's like a $50K to first GPP on DraftKings for the Euro Tour. So there you go.
Rotogrinders.com/premium. The link is in the description. $5 off your first month. So good luck tonight trying to pick out one of the Rams running backs, pick out all these receivers. Someone's going to be jumping up and down while another person's going to be throwing their laptop. I figure it's going to be that type of slate. So for Justin Van Zuden, I'm Jordan Cooper, and this has been Monday Showdown Live here on Rotogrinders.com.